Hey Final Fantasy fans, just want to give you a heads up that this episode will contain spoilers from up through Chapter 3 of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, but not beyond that, as well as a few quick spoilers from Final Fantasy XVI, the Lord of the Rings stories, and randomly the 1998 movie called The Big Lebowski. If you'd like, you can check the episode description for spoiler timestamps. And with that, welcome to the show. So you're like all business going after her for strategic reasons. I'm going after her because she's annoying. I'm like, destroy.
I mean, that's a strategy.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Final Fantasy Files, where we discuss all things Final Fantasy, from Elena to Mythril to reunions. My name is Jolie Hales.
And I'm Ernest De Leon.
Not sure that I got that impression really good.
I was like, what was that, Golem?
All right. But anyway, if you can't tell, today we're going to dive into our thoughts on Chapter 3 of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, which is basically the Mythril Mine. Right? So we'll be spoiling up through Chapter 3, but we will withhold spoilers from later in the game until we cover each of those chapters in detail, one by one, because as of this conversation, I'm actually currently in Chapter 12. I got to Chapter 12 last night. How about you, Ernest?
I am not in Chapter 12. I think I'm still in Chapter 5, and again, because I got sidetracked by Queen's Blood. Because I love that game.
It's a super fun game. And actually, Chapter 3 doesn't have any Queen's Blood in it, so...
No, but it has something else. And so Chapter 3 is actually thus far, now granted, I'm only in Chapter 5. I haven't gotten very far yet, so I know that there's a lot more. Right?
Just a hair.
Spencer was like, you have no idea how big this game is.
It's massive. I'm 115 hours, and I'm in Chapter 12 just barely.
Yeah, and I'm already at the point where I'm like, if they make this thing any bigger, it's too big.
Oh, see, I disagree. I could play this thing for years.
For me, it's like you start moving into the MMO territory, and then it's like, okay, this is too much.
Yeah, but you love the MMO. You played it for 10 years. I played 14 for 2 years. It's like...
I love it, and I don't play it for a very good reason today, which is
the timing,
too much time. But Chapter 3 for me was just, it was an amazing chapter for several reasons. But as you've already alluded to in the intro to this video, it's about the Mythril Mines.
Yes.
And if you're a Tolkien fan...
Oh, of course you're going to bring
which I'm a mega Tolkien fan, right? So, maybe our viewers may not know about Tolkien, or maybe they do.
I think everybody does ever since the Lord of the Rings trilogy.
The Lord of the Rings trilogy. Peter Jackson did an okay job, right? Then there's like...
I think it did pretty well.
There's like a Rings of Power now that Amazon has. And,
okay, yes.
And so actually...
Heard not as good.
It depends, right? Like some people love it, some people don't. I actually like it, but again, mega Tolkien fan, have read all of his works, including his more esoteric ones.
Okay.
But one of the things they cover in Rings of Power, which just happens, it's a coincidence here, is the origin of Mythril. So in this game, you're in a Mythril mine.
Correct, yeah.
And what's great is Mythril, of course, was introduced by J.R.R. Tolkien, right?
Is that where it came from?
He's the origin of the word Mythril.
I did not know that. Okay, that's fascinating.
Mythril is described in many different ways, but Mythril comes from two words, myth and rill. And I think myth means like gray or mist, and rill means like either sparkling or it's something like that.
Oh, interesting.
It's naturally occurring in mines, obviously. And more specifically, it's naturally occurring in one mine only, at least in the Tolkien universe. Now, maybe in Final Fantasy, it's in more places.
It's usually centralized in one place, it seems.
Right.
Never been found outside of these caves, in fact.
So in the Tolkien universe, it's only in one mine, in one place. And it carries some significance in terms of like the storytelling of the Lord of the Rings, but also it kind of crosses over into Final Fantasy, which is why I wanted to bring this up. So there's many different ways they describe it, but one of the ways you'll hear is it's like lighter than silk, stronger than steel. And then there's like a whole bunch of other comparisons that are similar to that, right?
Interesting.
Where it's an ultralight metal that is stronger than steel itself. And so you often see it in the context of armor, weapons, those kind of things, right? So I loved Chapter 3 here because we went into the Mythril Mines. And if you're a fan of Tolkien, you remember that The mithril mines were unique for multiple reasons. Number one, there was only one mine that had mithril in it. And of course, there's like this fantastical origin story around it. This is one of the things they tweaked a little bit in Rings of Power that people got a little bit upset about. So I'm not going to go into that. But the point is, it was only in one place. And what happened is the dwarves found it because the dwarves historically lived in the mountains, right? And they mined for all kinds of ores. Well, they find this mithril ore and they are so enamored by it. If you take this phrase I'm going to take and you repurpose it, you'll see where I'm going. For the love of mithril is the root of all evil. And they dig and they dig and they dig to keep finding more and more of this stuff. And what ends up happening is they dig so deep, they unseal the Balrog of Morgoth.
You shall not pass!
And the greed in their hearts for this ore is what ultimately results in the destruction of their mine, and basically the whole mine collapses in on itself and a bunch of them die.
And that happens where in Tolkien's work?
So the Amazon series talks more about the origin story and then the story of where the dwarves dig too deep and end up finding the Balrog. That is in the trilogy.
I just can't remember. It's been so long.
Gandalf's the one that actually points it out to the others, right? Saying that this is what happened. And so like this is a story about greed and like, yes, there's this ore and it's fantastical and they wanted to arm their armies because it's practically impenetrable. But the greed is what ends up doing them in the end, right? And destroys this entire mine and that kingdom there of the dwarves. Like they end up nomads sort of afterwards. So in chapter 3, we go into the mithril mine. And so as soon as I saw that we were going into a mithril mine, I was like, okay, how are they going to do this? Because the first mention of mithril in the Tolkien lore is in one of his works that was originally written around 1936.
Interesting.
So at this point, you're almost 100 years past the origin of the word. So where
are they going to go? Right.
Yeah. And so they did a great job, right? Obviously, I'll just say chapter 3 was awesome. I liked it. They wove it together with Tolkien, but not in an obvious and not in a, what I would consider like, I don't know, cringy way.
That's really interesting because I didn't make those connections. Obviously, it's been a long time since I've read The Hobbit or seen the trilogy, and I didn't watch more than just a couple clips from the Amazon series. So I'm really interested in seeing how they made that parallel because to me, when they go into the mines, Barret starts telling everybody about what mithril is.
Y'all know about mithril, right?
And in this game, it was almost played down right up front because they talk about how it had this amazing history and it was this amazing thing that they utilized, but then Shinra developed their own technology that was superior, and so mithril kind of fell apart, and that's why the mines are basically abandoned.
Shinra's been churning out stuff made with more durable alloys for years now. Even got that signature mithril sheen and everything.
In this, it was more of like a side story unless you look deeper, which I imagine you did, and I didn't see what you're going to be telling us, so I'm looking forward to that. And you're right, I was looking it up, and Tolkien is the person who first came up with the term mithril. And so this seems like one of those areas where the creators of Final Fantasy are taking from that, as they do from Star Wars, as they do from a number of different mythologies and creative works, which I think is really cool because they weave them all together in a very unique way. So chapter 3 specifically is called Deeper into Darkness. Obviously, that's both figurative and literal because they're going into a cave, they're going into these mines, which is dark, but then deeper into darkness is also this metaphor or this description of kind of what they're experiencing psychologically, emotionally, and what the story is going through as well. And it basically, the chapter starts when Cloud and the party arrive at the Mythril Mine, right? So they've crossed through the swamp and defeated Midgard-Somer. And then with the new openish world features of Rebirth, which we didn't really have in Remake, it seems to me like the developers are purposefully alternating between linear and then more open exploration style gameplay in this storytelling, which I'm actually really cool with, right? So chapter 2 was more of an open exploration chapter if you decided to do side quests and take that path.
Which is why chapter 2 sort of frustrated me.
Yeah, which is not your style.
Whereas chapter 3 3, I loved.
See, and I loved chapter 2, but I love chapter 3 as well because I like both and I like alternating. If every chapter out of 14 was open, it would be very overwhelming. The game's already huge as it is. So it's nice to be able to kind of take a breather where you move into more of a linear storytelling, even if you're a completionist like me who likes to do all the side quests, right? So chapter 3 is that more linear kind of path. And there is a designated set path to get through the mine. You take that path. And so for this particular discussion, I figured we'd go through this chapter more chronologically and talk about what worked, what didn't work for each of us. So diving right in, Cloud and the party are, of course, they're following these robed guys. And I love how that's like, even the official like title of these people are the robed guys.
Yeah, that's awesome. The robed guys.
Like that's what they call them, the robed guys, right? Even though some of them are girls, like you find that out later. But the robed guys apparently go into a cave opening that takes them into this Mythril Mine. And I do have actually a question for you that I was confused about. And if you don't know the answer, Ernest, maybe one of our viewers can write in the comments, please, to help us understand. I probably just missed this. So my question is, so as the party enters, they know they're going to be fighting monsters. And then Cloud jokes that he'll fight them off for like 2,000 gil, right? Because he's joking about being a mercenary.
You mind taking the lead, Merc?
For 2,000.
And it's kind of playful and fun. And I actually like that they keep going back to this like, oh, it'll cost you 2,000 gil, you know? But Aerith says something. She says,
enough for her standard course twice, right?
enough for her standard course twice.
Her what now?
And then Cloud like kind of looks embarrassed and Aerith says, well, ask him about it.
Ask him.
You know, and then he like changes the subject.
Forget it. You guys need to focus.
I was just, that like totally blew past me. Now, I played Remake right after it came out. So this is probably referring to something in Remake that I've just forgotten about because it's been years. But enough for her standard course twice. Like what is it feels like she's trying to tease him or something. Is she talking about the hand massage lady or something? Like I don't know what that was from. Do you know? Did that make sense to you?
Made sense, no. But when she said it, just like you, I remembered that like there were some things that happened in Remake that could have aligned with this.
Well, there must have. Her standard course twice.
There's two specific areas where like I thought about. Now, again, I'd have to go back and like replay those scenes, but one of them had to do with the initial meeting with her where he fell through the roof of the church and ran into her. And then there was some kind of like financial deal brokered somewhere in there. I don't remember what it was for anymore.
Well, she like does an exchange of like, I'll go on a date with you if you are my bodyguard.
Something like that.
One date ought to do it.
And then the other thing that came to mind is something that had to do with Don Corneo and all that kind of stuff. So it could be something in there.
It's probably something that is super obvious that I just missed.
I'm not sure.
But if somebody listening to this knows what the standard course twice reference to the 2K gil for Cloud means, please tell me. Because I was like, wait, what?
Yeah.
I don't understand.
Does that make me a dumbass?
I mean, the demeanor was fun. The back and forth was playful. I like that they're embarrassing Cloud over how stingy he was right up front when they were all business, you know what I mean? And now they're building camaraderie. So I liked that.
For me, it was also like this like awkward love triangle they have going on.
Oh, yeah.
And like her trying to kind of
Flirt with him a little bit too.
embarrass him, but also poke Tifa a little bit.
Well, that's it. Okay, now that you bring that up, that's really interesting too. And I mean, how many love triangles do you know in real life or have seen in real life or heard of where the girls who both are kind of after the same guy like are really close good friends and get along and have no animosity toward each other? Not exactly like realistic, but I guess it also goes to show that there are these really like good people, you know, that they can put their feelings aside and love each other even though they're both going after the same man. Even though you could argue that Aerith's heart is with Zack based on their past or whatever, but that is interesting. They're both these like pure souls.
Yeah. There's like a theme there, right? That they're weaving together with this whole like love triangle thing. They just like every chapter has a little piece about it as they go along.
Yeah.
I think this was just their piece in this chapter.
They're very brief in many of these chapters. I think they're going to increase as the time goes on. But so anyway, so this group goes into the Mythril Mine and there are all of these beautiful like museum style displays that you might see in the entrance of like a cave in the United States, which I thought was a really cool approach. Like the locals took pride in showing the cave entrance to tourists or something like that. It was just very real to me. I liked that. I thought it looked cool. And then the party catches up to the robed reunion guys in the cave, and the ground then, if you remember, surprisingly gives way, and one of the robed guys falls through the ground into the abyss.
Shit.
And one thing that I loved here are the different character responses to watching the robed zombie guy potentially fall to his death at that moment, because the responses say so much about who they are as a character. And I actually have these written down. So Tifa, right away, they're all kind of mortified to see this happen, but Tifa says, I hope they're okay. She's learned, I think, over the years, and this shows that she's learned to accept hard realities, but she's still like this hopeful optimist who has natural empathy for people and wants the best for others. And then Cloud's response is very much business, right?
Yeah,
So he acknowledges that he agrees, he hopes he's okay.
but if not, nothing we can do.
Cloud's response is very much like his character. He agrees with Tifa, but then he reverts to his like kind of brass tacks and flat reality acceptance. Not heartless, but not super empathetic. And then Tifa, she nods and she agrees with Cloud, like she knows she has to accept reality and that this is something that she has been encouraged to do time and time again by Cloud. So she's trying to remind herself and move on, even though she's naturally empathetic to the situation. But she also is, this is interesting, Tifa tends to be less confrontational and kind of accept others' opinions without arguing more than her own opinions. And there are moments of arc here where she's showing that she's learning to think for herself a little bit more. But before that point, Barret's response is my favorite. And you and I both are big Barret fans, right? He says, I don't know.
I don't know. We shouldn't just leave him.
So while Barret is like this giant, gruff, muscle military guy with this literal gun for an arm, right? Who swears like a sailor and yells half the words that come out of his mouth.
The hell you think's gonna happen when it's all gone, huh? Answer me!
He's the softy of the group at heart, right? We see that in the way he raises Marlene.
Well, so this scene also caught my attention for the exact same reasons you're saying, but I took a different tack of it, which is, for me, you're right. I was surprised that Barret said what he said, but then after that, after thinking about it for a minute or so, I was like, no, that makes perfect sense because he's ex-military. And most ex-military people, if you talk to them, there's a brotherhood thing. Now, granted, these robe guys have nothing to do with them, but it's like the nobody gets left behind rule, right? Like you never leave a fellow man behind, regardless of what the situation is.
Yeah, I agree with that. But is Barret ex-military? Because I thought he worked in the mines. I mean, Cloud is technically the ex-military.
I feel like he is ex-military, and I could be wrong. Like I don't know if they've ever explicitly said that he is ex-military, but he carries himself like he's ex-military.
He acts ex-military. I mean, that's how the character is definitely designed.
Left, your left, right. What?
So one of two things. He's either ex-military of some kind, or he's Walter Sobchak from what's that movie?
I don't know. What
with
movie are you talking
the dude in it.
The movie with the dude.
Well, he's actually called the dude.
Oh, he's actually called the dude? I
Yeah,
don't know
it's
what you're
Jeff
talking
Bridges.
about then.
Jeff Bridges is in it.
Oh,
It's a cult classic.
is it a remake?
No, it's old. I watch this movie at least once a year. The name is evading me. But John Goodman plays a character in there called Walter Sobchak, who throughout the entire movie keeps making all these references to Nam and how like men died with their face down in the mud in Nam, and I'm not going to stand for this or whatever.
I got buddies who died face down in the muck so that you and I can enjoy this family restaurant.
The Big Lebowski.
Big Lebowski, there you go, that one. He's either actually ex-military, and that's why this like presence and these words he's using all make sense, or he's Walter Sobchak, who never actually served in the military, but just like pretends like he did. And then we find out at the end of the movie that he never actually served in the military in Vietnam.
Oh.
So it's a comedy, right? So that's
Right.
kind of, but yeah, to me, he comes off as ex-military, but like you're saying, maybe he's not. Maybe he's just a disgruntled former mine worker.
But I mean, you could think about it like, I would imagine that mines would be run very similar to military operations in many ways.
Probably.
So you could pick up a lot of the exact same kind of characteristics if you were to work in a mine versus military.
Right, but I too was surprised, like you said, when he was like, it feels wrong to leave him here. And then even more when he like jumps down in there, I'm like, okay, hold on. They probably died. And how would he know that they didn't? And then to just jump in a crevice in the earth on the chance that they might have survived. And then what are you going to do?
But I mean, think about that though. Like what would motivate him to do that? It would have to be like a big heart.
A big heart?
It has to be that. And I mean, you have to also remember, like, he doesn't want Tifa to follow him because he's spent a ton of time in mines. So it may look like this dark crevice to us and to like Tifa, but to him, this is like a second home in a way. Like this was his career for a long time, right?
Yeah.
So it's not as dangerous for him.
I've never worked in a mine, so I can't speak to this. Maybe we have some listeners that are miners, but it would seem to me like when a collapse like that happens, the last thing you do is
just jump down
a level. But like you said, is it a big heart or is it something else? Because there is a statement he makes at the very end of this chapter that kind of indicates where his mind is at this entire time. That could be the reason he did this. That's not related to like a big heart.
Interesting. But I didn't catch that. I should be taking notes.
It's one of like the last things he says as the chapter's coming to a close. And it's the part where at the end he says something like, because we all know what at stake here. It's literally the end of the world.
I ain't stopping. Not for them or anyone. Not after Midgar. Not after what we saw. We all know what's at stake here. The fate of the world. So if they get in our way, that's on them.
And so like he's willing to risk everything because in his mind, it's like, it's Marlene, it's everybody else. And those robe guys are supposed to be the secret that's going to lead him to Sephiroth to put an end to this threat. And so I think in his mind, it's the mission. It's like, we need to follow these guys. We need to question them. They are ultimately how we find Sephiroth and how we defeat him and how we stop this threat to the world.
Okay.
He says that at the very end of the chapter.
So you think this is more of a mission-based response than like a softy response?
Well, I don't know, because the words he uses are, I don't think we should just leave them, right? And so like...
Because if it was mission-based, then I think he would just press forward though, because he doesn't need that one.
Right. So like, it's hard.
I think to me, it's just Barret's heart is humongous.
It could be, right? And it could be them, they're just writing that in but I feel like there's more than that. And we're going to get a payoff later for it. It obviously didn't happen in this chapter. So everything they're doing, even if it's at the risk of self-destruction, as long as they complete the mission to save the world, that's what matters to him.
Interesting. I think that definitely is a strong motivator for him, for sure. And if you look at this scene even closer, so Barret actually tells Tifa not to go with him. And I think, again, that's out of concern for his party member.
I'll go check.
Okay, I'll come too.
Nah, you stay. I know what I'm doing down here. You don't. Last thing we need is you getting hurt on us.
And Tifa's response is actually really interesting because I was talking a little bit about how she tends to let people kind of walk all over her opinion-wise, just a little bit, right? Like she's the first to go timid and quiet when people disagree. She's not confrontational. She can kick your butt physically, right? Like confrontational physically, she can destroy you. But as far as like emotionally goes, she's typically more timid. And when Barret tells her not to go down the mine, like, look, this is a job for somebody who was a miner. At first, she starts to like apologize, like,
Okay, if you're sure. Sorry to...
And then she deliberately stops herself and she settles on, thank you.
I mean, thank you.
It's a tiny moment, but what's the point of that moment if you're a writer, right? The point is to show this arc that Tifa is starting to go through, right? Where she's always been this like tough martial arts girl with a huge heart, but she has that history of being passive. And this is her moments of being like, no, I'm going to own what I say, and I'm going to acknowledge gratitude in moments where I should do so. I mean, again, short and sweet, but it's the game's way of showing us that she maybe is starting to value and recognize her own opinions a little bit more. So in that tiny little thing. And then as far as like Aerith goes, she doesn't say much during this entire scene except for
Careful down there!
which is, it would be weird to have her not say anything at all because she clearly has a big heart too. And that's just I think the game's way of ensuring that she cares.
Yeah. And our listeners are going to have to forgive me because I constantly refer to Red as the dog. just because, now I love dogs.
He's more of like a cat to me, though.
Yeah, I know he is.
Everybody calls him the dog, but I'm like, he's like a tiger or like a mountain lion.
He's like he's one of Hojo's experiments, right? So
but that's not where he originated. Like I think he was born like that.
Right, but he got like his powers and stuff, right?
I don't know, actually.
I don't remember anymore because, again, I haven't played the original 7 in decades.
And you're in chapter 5.
That too. But no, I love dogs. I'm 100% a dog person. I've had dogs all my life except for the last few years. So I always refer to him as the dog. And so when all this went down and then the dog jumped in, I was like, of course, because the dog can navigate this easily, or cat or whatever you want, cat dog, I guess. I don't know. He's got the, what do you call it? Like cats do, where they can, jump between things super easily and
pouncing. I don't know if that has a specific
pouncing.
term.
He has these skills, right? And so he is probably the least threatened by going into this thing because he can probably get himself out pretty easily.
Right. Well, animals live in caves and mountains and rocks.
I'm no stranger to caves.
The humans, I'm not so sure about. I'm like, you guys are going to get stuck. You're not as limber and as agile as an animal is, right? So
that's true, but it is a mine. So it has been configured for humans to a certain extent.
It is a mine, and I don't know if you could see better than I could, but that looked like just a crevasse to nowhere.
Yeah, it did look like an abyss.
I couldn't tell.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, you're right. Maybe there's just another level down there.
Yeah.
And they fell down a level. Sure, I know that happens in video games, but the way the camera worked, you know what it reminded me of? The Mythril Mines in Lord of the Rings where the Balrog's down there. So the last thing I'm going to do is go down that hole, but maybe they saw something we didn't.
So do you think that they shouldn't have gone down there? I mean, my opinion, when Barret was like, I don't know if we should just leave him, I'm like, you probably should just leave him. That was my thought. But
especially since they've seen a bunch of these robe characters.
Yeah.
It's okay, who cares if one's lost?
Yeah, but they're looking at each of these people, and Barret especially, because of a lot of the other reactions he has throughout the game, he's looking at these robe people as individual humans, not just as zombies,
right.
That
as opposed to Tseng, right? Or Sung or whatever.
Sung, yeah.
That guy's on another. I love that character.
Well, yeah, and we'll get to him because he comes up later, and I have some thoughts on that too, which is
awesome.
really interesting.
Yeah.
You're a fan of Sung.
I love him. Yeah.
But yeah, so Barret and Red go off into the abyss, which I don't think that I would highly recommend, right? I might have actually been more like a mix of Tifa and Cloud had I been there. Man, I really hope they're okay, but I don't know what else we can do, so I guess we'll just keep moving,
I wouldn't have even gone that far. I would have been like, they're gone and let's keep moving.
You're more like Cloud.
Exactly. As upset as I am to admit that.
Nothing we can do.
If it's my friend or my family member, sure, I'm going to,
but if they're a zombie.
Some random robe zombie, no, hey, it was nice knowing you. I'm going to continue where I'm going, right?
I would have felt bad.
I have a mission to complete here.
But I feel bad killing spiders.
But I'm one of those people that I'm generally mission-minded.
Yeah, well, so am I, but I
have to complete the mission. That's what has to happen here. So sorry you fell down the hole.
Moving on.
Best of luck, right? Yeah. Just keep moving.
Careful down there.
Tactically speaking, for the developers, this scene is a way to split up the party, right?
Exactly.
So that's the pragmatic purpose for this particular scene, is that basically they want to make Chapter 3 a lot bigger and in order to make Chapter 3 a lot bigger and also help us kind of understand how to navigate certain different characters.
You remember in, was it Remake where you got separated inside of Hojo's lab area? And you had to keep opening doors for the other one to get through?
Yes, and you're doing that communicator back and forth through the computers.
Right, I'm going to be really mad if this was literally just a plot thing.
Oh, I think it was.
And it wasn't actually something bigger. It was literally just how do we get the party split up? This sounds reasonable. Let's do this.
I think it was mostly that.
Because to you and I, it's I wouldn't have gone down that hole. So,
but Barret has the big heart, so Barret would, right?
Sure, but the reason I think it's a little bit more is because if they really wanted to, they could have just made Barret and Red the ones that fell down.
That's true.
And then they're on another level down below, and Cloud and the other ones are looking down at them hey, are you okay? Yeah, we're fine.
Yeah, but then you miss out on all of the character moments that we just talked about,
True.
right?
That's what I'm saying.
By doing it this way, I think it at least helps develop the characters in the party.
That's what I'm saying. I think it's bigger than just a plot device.
Okay, I think that's fair.
You're saying, it's more of a storytelling thing more than just hey, this is how we split them up so that we can have them each opening gates for the other ones and all that kind of stuff.
Honestly, it was probably a little bit of both. They probably said, how do we split up the parties but not make it look like it's just a plot device? You know what I mean? Like,
and here we are analyzing it to death, and like, we figured out what your plan is. We know what you did. It would have been better if you would have just let both of them fall down the hole. And then they're now split up, and we have to like figure out how do we reunite them at the end.
Right. And I actually didn't have a problem with it, to be honest, even knowing that it was probably a big chunk of its purpose was just a plot mover so that we could split up the party. And the reason I didn't have a problem with that is because I think it was smart of them to force us to play as the other characters, right? Because when you split up the party, then suddenly you have to play with Barret and Red, and then you have to play with Tifa and Aerith and Cloud, and you have to kind of learn how to fight with them because, let's be honest, like, I think we all kind of gravitate towards certain characters over others, and if we weren't split up, we probably wouldn't play much with the other characters, and so it forces us to see if we like them and kind of learn how they play.
So I am glad you brought that point up, because this morning, what I did is I went on YouTube and watched somebody else's playthrough of it, right? Just to, again, refresh my memory, and I noticed that this person, in the sections where they were playing as Red and Barret together, this person was playing as Red the entire time.
I see.
And letting Barret be like the support character, whereas I'm the opposite.
I was the opposite.
I'm always playing as Barret, and then in the other group, I'm always playing as Cloud.
Me too.
Right? But this person took a different tact, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. So you're absolutely right. Different people gravitate to different characters, and it actually made me kind of sad watching this because I was like, actually, Red's stuff is really cool. Like, I was watching him play as him and the different moves he was doing. I was like, man, I wish I would have played as Red. And I don't know if they do this later in the game, but if they had forced me to play as Red,
then you might have learned him better. Yeah.
Then I might have learned.
And I think they're kind of hoping that you will.
Right. But it was watching somebody else play that showed me like, oh, he's really cool. And then I started thinking about it. And I was like, you know what? That actually makes more sense because I'm the melee player, 100%.
Yeah, I am too.
So that's the reason I picked Cloud, because I'm up close and hitting this thing. And that's what Red is. And Barret's the range player, just like Aerith is, right? So like,
I love Barret. I play with him all the time.
It would make sense for me to play as Red, right? Because I always want to be up close and hitting things as opposed to, but I kept playing as Barret. And like now I'm starting to question my strategy.
Like maybe you should have used Red more.
Yeah, well, just my strategy. Like if I'm the up close and personal melee player, why am I playing as Barret when I have Red, who is the up close and personal? It just didn't it didn't align. And I think it goes back to what you originally said, which is, we just seem to align with the characters. Like, I think you and I really like Barret a lot.
We're big Barret fans.
We're big Barret fans, so we just want to play as Barret. And I have nothing against Tifa and Aerith, but I like playing as Cloud. And it's not even Cloud per se. I like the sword. That's what it is. I like the sword. Like, it could have been any other character that had an awesome Buster sword.
I like to chop.
Exactly. So, like, I never even considered playing as the dog.
The dog.
I just wanted Barret because he has the arm gun, and that thing's freaking cool.
Well, and it's nice, like, to have a range fighter who's as fast as Barret, at least in terms of shooting, because he moves really slow physically on the ground, but he's like, if you roll,
right. Well, I mean, he's massive, right? Like he's a big guy.
It makes sense.
Whereas the dog is like super fast and agile.
Yeah, he is. And Spencer actually, my husband plays with Red a lot and really likes Red. But one thing about Red is like Red is the most powerful, I think, if you're more of a defensive player, because you have to guard a lot and build up his vengeance mode, and then you can do some really awesome stuff. And I'm just not patient enough to guard. I don't guard very much, you know?
Yeah, when I saw him go off, when I was watching this, I was cheering from my seat. I was like, yeah, let him have it. Like that dog went nuts.
Yeah, because his moves are awesome. Yeah.
So you're bringing something up I don't even know. I didn't realize you had to guard and guard and guard. And
that's how you build up his vengeance mode the fastest, I think. But because I'm not a guarder, I don't use Red very often.
Me either. I don't ever guard.
So I was mostly Barret and like overcharge and like.
That's why I'm always at a disadvantage when I fight the Turks.
Oh, yeah.
Because I never want to guard. I just want to hit. So yeah,
me too.
I get it. Yeah.
But at this point in time, we're actually not with Barret and Red in the story. We spend time with Cloud, Aerith, and Tifa, right? So we're making our way through the mines. We're moving some mine carts around to access other areas while we're fighting these like various crawlers, ogres, I think crystalline crabs and such were kind of the monsters we saw a lot, which are obviously nods to monsters that we saw in the original game, and they're just reimagined, and they always do a really good job, in my opinion, of reimagining these different monsters.
I'll show you what I can do.
And then at one point, the room like opens up to this like huge cave, and it's clear that this Mythril Mine is a tad bit bigger than the one that we remember from the original 7. And we knew it would be, right? Because it's going to be an entire chapter. But this is where you're like, okay, we're just getting started.
Well, the dwarves dug deep.
There you go.
Right? So
yeah,
the mines were massive.
But they didn't do that in the original game, right? And it was still a Mythril Mine even then.
Well, I mean, because you're talking about like that era, like stuff was a little constrained back then.
Just a tad. Just a tad, right? Yeah. So then at that point, so after making our way through the mines, that's when we bump into, as you mentioned, 2 of the Turks. So Rude, who we're already very familiar with, and then also another Turk who we haven't met yet in this game, which is Elena.
Feast your eyes on the Turks' latest and greatest, Elena. But you 3 can call me your worst nightmare.
And she's this like young blonde who she's basically been promoted to the Turks after we had kicked the crap out of Reno.
After Reno got it.
And he was forced on vacation, right, to recover. And so Cloud and the party overhear Elena kind of complaining about their mission and the weird robed guys. And they're standing next to one of these robed guys. And I think based on the level of where we are in the cave, it's probably the robed guy that fell down the abyss is what I think. I think that's the robed guy that like
it could be, yeah, who knows,
because it's just the one and they're always in these clusters, right? And they were deeper in the mine, so that kind of made sense to me. So in that way, this could be like a sign that he survived, right? And then we're discovered by Elena and Rude, and then this fight ensues. And I'm curious your thoughts about Elena, because I have mixed feelings about Elena. So admittedly, she kind of rubbed me as annoying right up front, to the point that when we fought her and Rude, I focused on her first and I just kicked the crap out of her relatively easy.
It's on now.
Sorry. Which was quite satisfying because she had irritated me. I'm like, I'm going to destroy you. And then I did.
Ugh, damn it.
Her voice performance is fine. Like, it's not award-winning. It's not terrible. I think her voice timbre does fit the character that they were going for.
Maybe you need a vacation.
But the character itself, just the way it's written, kind of annoyed me in this scene. But she does start to grow on me more throughout the game, although I still haven't concluded how I feel about Elena 100%.
First of all, let me say I love the Turks. Love the Turks. And I realize they're like enemies and all as villains or whatever.
No, they're pretty cool though, because they're a little bit different dimensional.
Especially Rude used a phrase of like something like she's new.
She may be new, but she's still a Turk. And a consummate professional.
And to me, that encapsulated what the Turks are, right? Like they are these awesome fighters, but then they're like dressed in suits.
Yeah, they wear suits.
Like, and I only wear a suit like if somebody dies or somebody gets married, right? Like that's it, right? So I'm not the suit guy, right? But
if you were in like a special forces or like an FBI kind of situation.
But see, now that's another thing. Like if you're an FBI paper pusher, like desk jockey, you're in a suit, right? But if you're like a field agent,
that's right. You're probably undercover most of the time, to be honest.
It's different, right? But like Reno's, he's okay. And like you said, Elena, I was like, this chick is annoying. But Rude, I don't know why I love his character, because like
you like the all business character.
Exactly. I was gonna say I hate to use the term, but like he's a consummate professional. Like this guy is just like, I'm here to take care of business, and that's it, and I'm out.
Rude's not a bad person, really.
No, I'm not bad. But like it or not, I sometimes have to do bad things.
That's one thing I appreciate about the writing of the Turks, is that like they didn't try to write like these crazy like reasons why they became a Turk, and maybe they do that later, I don't know, but like
they do with some characters.
To me, it was just like, hey, these are just consummate professionals.
It's nothing personal, bitch.
Right? These are like special forces operatives. They come in, they have a mission, they do their job, and they leave.
They focus on the mission.
There's no like emotion involved in it.
Right. They dropped the 7 plate.
They
dropped the 7 plate on the entire citizenry.
Plate separation initiated.
You son of a bitch! What have you done?
They're pure business.
Don't take it personal.
And I realize that granted, they're villains or whatever, but like in their mind, they're not even considering the morality of things.
No, they're just following
orders.
orders.
They're just business people.
No, you don't. Not when I'm working.
And so like I love the Turks on one level, even though they're villains. But yeah, Elena kind of, she got on my nerves. And so I did the same thing you did. I went after her first, but for a different reason. because the minute he said she's new, but she's a consummate professional, I was like, okay, so she's the less trained
She's
one.
the easier one.
I'm going to go after
kill.
her first. And of course, Rude tried to like, protect her or whatever,
Yep.
but I did the exact same thing you did. I went straight after
Just
her,
wailed on
took
her.
her out, and then got Rude. And then, of course, you know who shows up after that. And
Right. So you're like all business going after her for
Right.
strategic reasons. I'm going after her because she's annoying. I'm like,
I mean, that's a
destroy.
strategy. That's a strategy. It's just a different strategy.
Just a little bit different reasoning and rationale behind it, right? And I mean, as far as that fight went, I tended to use Cloud the most, but I know you mentioned that you like to use Tifa. I actually use Aerith more than Tifa, but I use Aerith very strategically as a healer.
Yeah.
Right. So I built her ATB up just so I can use Prey a lot. But I don't know how you are. I am constantly switching between characters in every fight all the time through the whole game.
So I might switch, but it's a strategy thing. So like I almost always start with Cloud. And then if I figure out that it is advantageous strategically to switch to another character, like for example, there's a flying thing, I'll switch to Barret because he's a ranged character.
Because he's, range.
So it's all strategy based.
But you kind of stay on the same character.
So with this fight, for example, and by the way, my strategy is the same for just about every fight. So the first thing I do is I do the assessment on the characters to figure out where their weaknesses are.
Yeah, me too.
And then all I did is I locked on Elena and just used her only to build up my gauge and then would cast fire at Rude in the background.
Okay.
Off screen, because that would weaken him and then eventually stagger him and let the other characters wail on him, and I didn't have to worry about it. And so now granted, I don't play on hard mode, I play on the story mode. So I don't want to pretend like I'm some super like action RPGer, but this fight was super easy for me just because of that.
That's interesting. So when I first played Remake, I tended to play more as like one designated character and only switched when the game kind of made me do it. But then I played Remake on hard mode. And when you play hard mode, you cannot play that way. Like it will not allow you to do it. So you have to switch constantly between the different characters so that you're kind of driving attention toward different people and you have different, techniques. You can't use items, so you got to use healing. Like there's so many reasons to do it. So you have to be switching constantly. And because I played Remake on hard mode, that became my battle style for Rebirth. So I am constantly switching between characters the entire game. And the way that I do it is I'll build up, like I'll start out with Cloud, right? And I usually have first strike materia on him. So he's already got an ATB basically filled. So then I'll assess, right? I'll assess right away. And then I will switch to the next character, build their ATB up to just 1 or 2 if I need to. And then I'll start using an ability or casting, and then I'll switch immediately while that's happening, and then I'll build up that person, and then switch when they start doing their abilities so that I'm not like missing any beats. I'm just constantly switching and hitting and switching and hitting. The difference though with this particular fight is that while I do that, I tended to stay away from Tifa, or at least I was on her for less time, because I feel like I keep getting hit easily with her. I haven't mastered her. I haven't really tried to master her, but she's just not my favorite. And I know some people wail with her. Like they're so good with her.
If you know what you're doing with her, she's
awesome.
She's really good. Yeah.
And I remember liking her a lot in Remake. I don't think I've put in the time to really get used to her here. So anyway, so the fight wasn't hard either for me. And eventually the fight ends when Barret appears with Red, right? And he's pointing his gun arm at the Turks, which is kind of funny because he's always pointing his gun arm at people. They never stop, but whatever.
Hands in the air, right now.
I mean, he's got a gun. Like, what else are you going to do with it? Point it at somebody.
But then, to your point, they're interrupted by the other Turk, Tseng.
You need someone to blame.
Right, who shows up. And the first thing that Tseng does is he shoots and he kills the surviving robed guy.
Yep.
So this guy falls from the abyss, we think, only to be shot and killed nonchalantly by Tseng when Tseng shows up, which was a really interesting move. Then Elena kicks the grenade at us. Red knocks it out of the way. It explodes the ground underneath us, and then we fall deeper into the Mythril Mine cave. Now, before we get into Tseng and what his motivations are, I did want to point out just how much more content there is in Rebirth compared to the original game.
There has to be, right? Like you're talking about 3 games that encompass what was one, there better be a lot more content, right?
So chapter 3 is all the Mythril Mine, right? But in the original Final Fantasy VII, you're only in the Mythril Mine for 10 to 15 minutes. That is it. And that's including all of the monsters and the fights that you have. And if you play it, today, where you can actually play it on like triple speed, you're literally in there for 5 minutes. I mean, it's barely something that you remember. While the Rebirth Mines, in comparison, they have multiple levels. There's these huge cave rooms and like multiple winding caverns, and there's even like lakes in there. And the original game is basically just 3 different screens. That's it. Like, it's just 3 different visual scenes that you see. That's it. There's no mine car puzzles.
Hey, they did what they could with what they had.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, totally. I'm not saying it was bad.
No,
I'm just saying it's fascinating that they went from this to that.
They're now able to expand on the ideas and like deliver more.
I think it's really cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's no mine cars in the original game.
Now that part annoyed me.
I knew this was coming.
I
Okay,
knew
we're
you were
going to
gonna-
get to that. I'm excited because it slows you down and you hate that. And I'm excited to talk to you about it. But basically, in the original game, you're just fighting a few enemies, and then you pop out on the other side of the game, basically into more of what looks like grasslands. That's it.
Yeah.
That's the whole thing. In fact, in the original game, the robed reunion guys, they don't even show up. That's something that was added more across Rebirth, probably because it has something to do with this whole reimagining, but also
That's what I was going to say. This is one of the reasons I'm like super excited to get to the conclusion of the series.
to see what they do.
I want to see what they're going to do. Because like 7 original was awesome. But if you're reimagining it and you now have the technology to expand the scope to this scale,
You could do so much more.
they can do some amazing things.
Yeah.
And I'm sure they will. I'm kind of excited. Like, I can't wait to see what the conclusion of this whole thing is.
Oh, yeah, I totally agree with you. But I also think there's another purpose in storytelling for these robed guys. So the robed guys also help remind us of what our motivations are. Because, and we'll talk about this more as the game goes on. One of, I think, the weakest places in storytelling for Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is it's hard to remember what's motivating everybody. Like, it's like, why am I going this way? Where am I going?
Yes, because this goes back to exactly what I was saying.
Because they're expanding
It's
this.
too big in scope now.
Right.
And it's like, now you need plot devices to remind you, like,
Yeah.
why are you doing this?
But 7 Original was kind of that way too. Because even
yeah.
at its size, you're like, okay, so why are we going here? What are we doing? Like, the motivations aren't they're crystal clear if you look for them, but you have to keep remembering them because
Yeah.
they're not driving them home all the time.
It was like eco-terrorism, and then it's Sephiroth, and then it's like...
And save the planet. But
it's like all this different stuff, and you're like, okay, well, how do we tie all this together?
Right. So the motivations are kind of weird, but following the robed guys is like a simple goal, right? Like, follow the robed guys. So I
Right.
think by having the robed guys in there, it helps us kind of remember those motivations. But then it also does a second thing, and it builds up sympathy for them along the way, unless you don't care about them, which sounds like you don't really care.
I really don't.
I care about them, though, because I feel
I'm
like
like, whatever.
I feel like the game is building up this sympathy, though, because it's playing off this assumption that Cloud is on the same path.
You're a soldier too, aren't you?
Ex-soldier, actually.
Didn't mean to scare you. The symptoms aren't always the same. And who knows? You might be one of the lucky ones.
So if you build up sympathy for these robed guys by seeing them kind of be like mistreated or just have like these hardships that aren't their fault, then it also builds up like your apprehension for that happening to Cloud, who we care about because he's the head of our party, right? But it sounds like you don't care about the robed guys. Anyway, okay.
At all. Other than I know they're going to Sephiroth.
Yeah.
And so I'm just like, follow them because I
Okay.
can't wait to get to Sephiroth. Like that's what I'm after here.
There's
so
a chapter.
let's keep it moving, you know?
Oh man, there's a chapter coming that I'm excited to talk to you about then with the robe guys. Oh, it's gonna be great. Let's go back to the Turks though. So in the original game, we do run into the Turks, the same 3, but we don't actually fight them. We just talk to them and then they leave, right? There's no like grenade blowing up the ground and making us fall deeper into the cave. There's no shooting any robe dudes because the robe dudes aren't there, right? It's just like a, hey, Turks, we're on separate missions. This is Elena. See ya. That's pretty much the gist of the scene.
They're professionals.
It's interesting, though, because in the original game, I felt like Elena is also made out to be more of a bumbling junior Turk who isn't as capable, whereas she's pitched more in Rebirth as being like a capable rookie, right? Who holds herself to this high standard and has all this assertiveness in her. Now, Tseng is the Turk character who I think we're both interested in his motivations, because he's the guy who shows up and he just shoots the robed guy.
Here's the thing, right? He's like the head of the Turks, right? Like that's his position.
He seems to be, yeah.
And it seems like he reports directly to
Rufus.
Probably Rufus. And Tseng to me is like, he comes across as one of those individuals who's like, same thing. He's a Turk, right? So he's consummate professional. He's all about business. He's got a boss. The boss says to do this. He goes and does it. Whatever else is like collateral damage that happens as a result of it, he doesn't care.
Right.
He's got like this one thing he's got to work on. But I feel like he knows more.
I agree with that.
Than he's letting on. And it just so happens that what he knows and what he thinks aligns with what his boss is telling him to do. And so it works for him. But I feel like at some point, the two are not going to be in alignment and he's going to go rogue.
Okay, that's interesting. Okay, so actually, you and I are kind of in a alignment there, right? Because you never played Crisis Core, right?
No.
Okay, so in Crisis Core, Tseng is allied with Zack for much of the game.
So Turks always do this stuff?
Someone has to do it.
Must be rough.
Don't worry. We're paid much better than you are.
And I won't give Crisis Core away, because it gives a lot of what could be coming away. Mm-hmm. But I will say that Tseng and Zack go on a number of missions at the beginning of Crisis Core. So you kind of get to know Tseng a little bit better. And I get the feeling that, yes, he's a consummate professional. He's following orders. But I think he also knows more. But also, I feel like he has a sense of morality that he doesn't openly show. But I don't know this for sure. He could just be a total douchebag in the end. I think both in Rebirth and the original game, there are moments where he shows, even in this scene, that he legitimately cares about Aerith's well-being, right? Because here in this scene, he even looks at the party and I think he says something along the lines of, take care of Aerith for me.
Take care of her.
Take care of Aerith for me.
And to me, I saw the exact opposite.
Okay, what did you see?
I saw it as, for right now, she's untouchable to him.
I see. Okay.
For whatever reason, but he has an ultimate plan for her.
And it's going to circle back around.
And he's telling them to take care of her.
For the interim.
Right, because he's under orders to handle something else and he can't deal with it. So he's like, you better take care of her.
Yeah.
Because ultimately he has some like vile thing he's going to do far later on in the game. And in order for that to happen, she needs to survive and get all the way to that point. Right.
Okay, that very well could be it. So that's the interesting thing about Tseng is that I think it could go either way, but I don't know which way it's going to go because I read it as like he cares about Aerith potentially, but it also could just be potentially like, hey, you're not my mission right now.
It could be that he's also an ancient.
Oh, wow.
And is somehow protecting her.
I don't think he's an ancient. I think Marlene might be one, but I don't think he is.
By way of like infiltrating Shinra. And so who knows? Like there could be this whole conspiracy theory of a plot there. I think it's more like he knows something, probably because either he and Hojo were buddies or I don't know. And so like he knows more than he's letting on, but in order to keep his cover, if you want to call it that, as part of the Shinra organization, he has to follow the rules and follow his orders. And so he's like telling them, take care of her, right? Because at some point later, now you could be completely right. It could be that he knows that she is ultimately going to be the undoing of Shinra and some other thing later on. And so like he's finding a way to protect her without actually directly interacting with her so he doesn't give up his cover inside of Shinra. Who knows? Who knows?
But do you remember when he went to go see her at her house? Mm-hmm. Like there are a couple of moments, I swear he kind of said things that made it seem like he actually cared about her well-being.
I mean,
maybe not. I could have read those wrong, but I got that sense.
I don't disagree with you that he cares about her well-being.
You just think he's mission.
I agree with you 100% on that. I think that he cares about it for a nefarious purpose, not a good one.
Okay, see, I'm talking about like authentically caring about a person because he might have like a soul.
Been thinking, was all that necessary?
Had we refused, someone else would have completed the task.
we have spared that someone the burden of a guilty conscience. Perhaps that will ease yours.
Yeah, nope.
Now, I always want the characters who are bad to be good. I want Sephiroth to be good. So,
Sephiroth's just misunderstood.
He murders people. So
but he's misunderstood.
I think we can understand that.
You understand his actions, but that's one of the things I do like about the Sephiroth character overall is like he has experienced some trauma.
Oh, for sure.
My mother's name was Genova. Could it be that I was created the same way?
Is it so much that he's just an inherently evil person, or is it that
we know he's not?
The trauma that he has experienced has sent him off on this path that is just like
it's that.
Yeah, and that's what I mean.
Because
like,
he was a good person for most of his life.
For a long time, right? So
obviously something triggered him to go crazy. It's still his fault, I would argue.
Well, I mean, yes, right? So it depends how you look at it, right? Like,
well, yeah, and
it's the same way. It's the same way, like how modern society views whether they're addicted.
That's true.
Or that they're just junkies, right? Like,
yes,
it's the same thing for Sephiroth. Like, a trauma happened to him that has like warped his mind. Now, what's actually in charge here? Is it the Sephiroth that was good all those times, or is it a part of Sephiroth's like psyche that is like taken over?
Right, like almost like a mental illness in a way, like something that can't be controlled.
Right, like who knows?
Right.
Right, and I think they're actually going to give that to us at the end of this.
Oh, I hope.
3-game series. I'm pretty sure they are because, like, again, Sephiroth is one of those characters that even before this, you could see where the original intent was a much deeper character than just I was good and then I became bad. There's more in there, and I'm almost certain the writers are going to give it to us.
I really hope so. I really want to see that, right? Because right now they're kind of flirting with all the different scenarios because they want to keep us wondering.
Oh, they have to, right? They have to like throw us off the trail everywhere. But then they gave us a dog, so that kind of the dog's not going to go off the trail, right? Because the dog can smell everything. So I don't know.
Before, I wouldn't have had any trouble tracking that scent. Now, though. Perhaps this bird is willing to take on an apprentice.
But I think Tseng is could be similar. Tseng could just be following orders, not a super deep character. But in Crisis Core, you see him make good sense judgments that to me might come from somebody with like a moral perspective, potentially. But it's not clear.
We found the remains of our people there as well.
Well, so after doing Chapter 4, I'm leaning towards your argument.
Yeah.
Because of the discussion that happened there between Rufus and the group.
Right, but we can't talk about that yet.
Well, I'm not going to say what it is, but I'm just saying, like, after going there, I'm like, okay, I kind of see where that is.
Yeah.
But the thing is, you got to remember, both Tseng and Rufus are
multidimensional,
ultra intelligent, multidimensional people. So they're playing 3-dimensional chess.
Right. But I want to know, like, what's driving people.
Well, that's the thing.
You know?
All these scenes we walk into as gamers, we're looking at this from a 2-dimensional chess perspective.
Right.
With these guys that are playing 3-dimensional chess, right? And that's on purpose. That's on purpose.
They're playing that hand, at least, that it's 2-dimensional. But those of us who know better are like, there's got to be more to this, right?
Oh, we know there's more, but they try to keep us off balance.
Yes, which is smart. It's good writing to do that.
Yeah.
But I mean, like with Tseng, like even when he comes into the cave at this point and he shoots the robed guy, like he clearly knows a lot more than we know, right? What if in his mind, he's putting that robed guy out of his misery because he knows that cellular degradation is not reversible and that maybe death is more of a mercy? Like it could be even that, right? I mean, although you could argue that that's still not the right moral choice. Like who are you to decide who lives, who dies? But
I mean, he's Tseng. That's who he is. Like,
yeah.
He makes the calls, right? Like,
right, he does.
You need someone to blame.
I don't know. I just want to learn more about his character as the game progresses.
Yeah.
Just based on what we're seeing so far.
You can read a lot into that scene, right? Because think about it. Like, imagine that Tseng hadn't shown up in this scene yet, and the Turks had actually gotten the upper hand.
Yeah.
They would have annihilated the party. They would have killed them all, including Aerith, right? So
you think they would have destroyed us?
Yeah, right. Like, I'm not talking about like from the writers in the game perspective. What I'm saying is like they were on a mission and they had been told a long time ago to eradicate Avalanche and everybody that had anything to do with it.
Yeah.
Right. So like Tseng coming in can have multiple things, right? So like shooting the robe guy is one thing, but remember that our team now had the other ones like Rude and Elena backed into a corner. They were all but dead, right? We were going to blast them off that edge of the cliff into the abyss. So Tseng comes in as like a Deus Ex Machina device and actually saves both sides.
Interesting.
So the hooded guy is the one that gets the short end of the stick for sure, but like...
Yeah, you might say that.
Rude and Elena don't end up in the abyss. Right. And our team doesn't end up obliterated, right?
Yeah.
Assuming that the Turks had gotten the upper hand, which they didn't, but I'm just saying, like, had they?
Yeah.
So he's almost like a balance mechanism here.
Yeah. Okay.
So when I saw this scene, I was like, that's interesting, but I still think he's devious. But you're right. It could be that he's actually not devious, that he's actually...
He could be playing an upper moral hand in a weird way.
Or that he's a good character, but he knows that this story has to play out a certain way for the good to win.
Yes.
And so all he's doing is putting his thumb on the scale.
Okay. Yeah.
That's it.
I think it's possible. And I'm really interested in
me too.
Tseng's fate. So I really hope they wrap him up.
But I love Tseng. Like, he's one of my favorite characters.
Yeah, he's cool.
While you're still wanted fugitives, if you stay out of our way, we'll stay out of yours.
All that Turk stuff happens. Then the Turks leave. That's all brand new content, right? Because in the original game, you just talk to them, then they go, there's no fight, all that.
Right.
But then here in Rebirth, we fall down after the Earth gives way, and then our party is separated yet again.
Another plot point.
Conveniently, exactly like before.
It's like they brought the hooded guy back to tie up the plot point and then put a bullet in his head. And so now the situation starts again, but without the hooded guy.
Well, the hooded guy is actually there. We're not done with hooded guy yet. I don't know if you remember this, but so Cloud and Aerith and Tifa, they land on some solid ground like above, while Red and Barret fall into this like lake below, right? And they call out to each other. But again, remember, we're split up in the exact same way as before. So you thought we had met up and like you'd get to pick your party and whatever, but no, we're back to Red and Barret, Cloud, Tifa, and Aerith divided, right? But Red and Barret then swim to shore. There's some kind of funny banter there.
Just gonna float there.
And then the interesting moment that I wanted to point out with the robed guy is as Red and Barret are climbing out of the water, they see the crumbled body of the robed guy. Again, the guy who probably fell once again, I'm assuming, when the rest of the party fell. This is the guy with the bullet in his head. And then Red mentions how he saw a lot of these robed guys at Hojo's lab.
They're following Sephiroth, or so Cloud seems to think.
And then Barret says, referring to Cloud, let's hope
the boy can keep it together.
So this is a moment where Barret acknowledges that something is wrong with Cloud. We know, but because the party is like, in my opinion, like the worst communicators in the world, like nobody talks about like the main issues that Cloud is having. And it's like, if I were in that party, I'd be like, okay, Cloud, let's sit down and talk about this. Like, what are you feeling? What do you think it means?
It's like, you clearly have terminal illness.
Right. You have like a problem.
But nobody wants to talk about it.
But also, like, if I was Tifa, like Tifa knows things that are contrary to what Cloud is showing her. Like, and they had a moment where they were trying to talk it out at the beginning of chapter 2, but I would talk that out so much better. Anyway, I'm so much better than Tifa and Cloud.
Well,
whatever. Okay.
Yeah, I feel like it's one of those things where like you and I think by our natures are communicators.
Well, I mean, we're talking on a podcast. The whole thing is communication, and right?
These individuals are clearly not.
Right.
Right. And I think that also has something to do with like the people who are more emotional.
Yeah.
Often have more trouble communicating because
those emotions.
The emotions come in.
The emotions take over.
Right. Where they can't set those aside.
Right.
And just have like a discussion. But now granted, if you knew that your lifelong best friend had a terminal illness.
I'd be talking about it.
And maybe they didn't realize it, or maybe they did. And they didn't want to talk about it because they didn't want to acknowledge it.
That's true. That's true. There is a respect element there.
Like, how do you write this in a way where like you can infer things without clearly saying, because clearly at some point down the line, it's all going to come together. Right. And and we're going to get punched in the face.
It's just crazy because we're spending, I mean, I've spent 115 hours with these characters.
Oh, yeah.
And they don't have it worked out.
But this is what Square Enix does, though, right? Like they spend 80 hours building up your affinity for these characters and then just punch you right in the stomach. Right. And punch you in the face. That's what they do. So they're literally building us up to tear us down. So just remember that. Like, I always have to remember that when I'm playing Final Fantasies is like, this is intentional. Right? This is like the ultimate form of video game gaslighting is what it is.
I know. really
and
is.
we love it. And we keep coming back to it.
It's true.
So what does that say about us? Like, it's a
I know.
complete
What does
Stockholm
it say?
syndrome.
Let's psychoanalyze ourselves as players of this game, right?
Yeah, it's Stockholm syndrome in the video game. That's what it is. There's no other way to put it. I think I told you this the other day that I can't wait till we get to the end of this and then they don't deliver what you're asking.
Oh, I'm going to be...
No, that was for Rising Tide. That was for 16.
Oh, yeah. Which we still need to play.
Like where they don't deliver what you're looking for and then you're just going to tear them a new one because you were expecting like all this like,
When Final Fantasy does not end in what I think is an adequate way, I tend to vocalize that. What the bleep, McFest bleep. That doesn't mean it has to be so dang depressing. That's the problem, is we don't see it. I don't care. It's depressing. They don't pay off the good stuff.
So the thing is, you have hope then as a human being because you're able to recognize what happened and then you're angry about it. I'm complete Stockholm syndrome where I'm like, well, there must have been a good reason for this.
I know, but you give them credit and I'm like, no.
For them to gaslight us, I'm okay with it. Like, it's one of those things.
But I also come from storytelling, like I come from Hollywood, right? Writing and directing is what my career has been for 2 decades now. So when I see storytelling that I think is whatever, we don't need to go there. Okay, whatever. Okay, going back to the
they
mines.
Fall down.
So they fall down, and this to me is where the mines start to look even more visually amazing than they looked before. So we enter, you know what I'm talking about, that giant room, like the giant cavern with Barret, and it has like multiple different levels, and there's all these glowing crystals, and I just think it looks awesome, right? And I love this also, I didn't think about this until later, but I love the logical progression of the mine so that when the deeper you go, the less man-made structures that you see, the more natural cave formations that you see, the more like glowing crystal that you see. And then as you work your way up, you see more and more mine cars, tracks. And then as you get closer to the exit, obviously more man-made lighting and so forth and fencing, a lot, all that. I mean, kind of subtle things that you don't really notice consciously, but I think really play into the subconscious enjoyment of the game. Also the textures look so cool in this game. And it's easy to take the textures for granted until like suddenly you have one of those glitch moments where the textures just disappear for a hot second. Did you ever have any of those?
Right, they pop out and then they pop back in and you're like, what just happened?
Yeah, and they pop back
and what's
in.
crazy is that even like, because obviously they wrote this in a game engine that had like the lighting thing where the lighting reflects off the walls and the water and stuff. And so that pop out from the polygon also like drains the light source for a second.
Drains the lighting,
and then
right?
it goes back.
The contrast changes and everything. Yeah.
You're like, what just happened here?
Right. But it really makes you realize like how detailed it is when it does go out for a second. And it doesn't happen very often, but in the cave when it happens.
Oh, they put a ton of work into this game.
So
a ton
much.
of work.
And I think it looks so good. And at this deepest point in the mine is when your party consists of course, Barret and Red. And that's also the point in the game where it's introduced that you can shoot up the crystals, right?
Yes.
Which totally made me think of you, Ernest, because...
And I did it. I lit that whole cave up.
Because I remember you said that shooting the boxes in Remake was like one of your favorite parts of navigating Barret, right? So tell me about your crystal shooting experience.
Yeah, so that's true. And like you, I noticed like when you got to this depth of the mine, right? You're so deep in there now that there's a big body of water, right?
Yes.
And so like the light is reflecting everywhere. And it's this weird juxtaposition of like you are in the darkest part of the mine, but it is bright. And it is like glittering and gleaming.
From natural
It's almost
formations.
like no matter how dark things get in the world, in life, there's always a source of light there.
I like that.
But you're right. Like as soon as I saw that I was able to shoot these things, I was like, I'm going to do it. And on my way back up and out, I shot every piece of mithril there was that I could shoot.
Yes.
I even went back and like doubled around in these smaller rooms just to make sure I got everything. And I was watching it say like chunk of mithril ore, chunk of mithril ore, chunk of iron ore, like as I was, making my way back up.
Yeah.
And it was like the most cathartic thing to go through and just blow everything up with his gun on the way back up to the point where we get to the part where I was mad again.
That you weren't happy. But before we get to that part, I thought shooting the crystals was crazy fun. But I really need to start a segment in these discussions called like Jolie's favorite physics or something.
Oh man, don't even start with like, I found some awesome ones in like, I guess it's chapter 5.
No, there's good stuff in like every chapter.
That were great. But yeah.
So favorite physics. So in chapter 2, for me, it was the box wall around the Queen's Blood player, right? But here in chapter 3, it was at that top ledge in that massive cave room. So when you climb up to the top ledge and you shoot all those crystals and then you shoot all those boulders. So, okay, you can like run around and kick those boulders and crystals around, and it's so ridiculous. Like you could run through them, and I just had too much fun with it. Like I don't know what it is.
I mean, you know, those things weigh a ton.
They do,
and they're just like bouncing around.
Off you like they're balloons, but like the physics in the item themselves is pretty realistic, except in the way that it hits you, and it's so funny.
There is a point in chapter 3 too. There's a plank that's like kind of hanging off the ledge a little bit, and it's like a blue wooden plank, and it looks like you can walk on it, but it actually, you can't. It doesn't connect to anything on the other side. It only overhangs the ledge by just a little bit. But when you walk over, like that plank's bouncing around and doing, like, if it was real and you had stepped there, you would have fallen over the edge
down.
with the plank.
Gotcha.
But you didn't. So the whole physics thing was just, it's a riot in this thing. It's funny.
It's so funny. And I probably spent more time kicking boulders in that little space and crystals around than I spent in the entire Mythril Mine in the original game. Like I spent so much time there. And did you know, fun fact about the physics engine in this game, that you can actually kick things or hit things off of ledges and watch them fall down and to like the ground below. Like totally not important, but important at the same time.
That blue wooden plank, that's what happens.
Yeah.
When you step on the far end, it just falls down. Like it falls off into the abyss or whatever.
But you can like watch it fall and hit the ground. The physics continue like far away from you.
I'm sure that if I would have looked over, I could have seen it. But when I saw that, I was just cracking up.
See, I swear, if this whole game had sucked, except they kept the physics engine like this, I would still think it was so much fun.
Yeah.
Conceptually. Okay, so like the way that things move when you hit them is hilarious, but the whole concept behind the developers leaning into this like ridiculous physics stuff, that is what I appreciate so much, that makes it so funny to me. Like I'm so grateful that they're like, we're gonna put this in for those people who will appreciate it, which is totally me. But anyway, though I will say one other thing about this cavern. I'm curious about your experience here. Did you get lost at all in that cavern room?
No.
So you just found you found your way straight out of there. So okay, so I did.
But that's probably because I wanted to make sure I had shot every piece of mithril.
Yeah.
So I was kind of doing loops. So it probably is the case that like if you were going after the mithril like I was, it was naturally leading you through the progression of how to get to the exit.
It was. And they even tell you, like, when you go into the room, they're like, that looks like a place to go. And they actually, like, pan the camera up.
Now, how are we getting out of here?
That might be an option.
Final Fantasy is typically not very difficult in terms of like the puzzles. I think they used to be way more difficult in the days of like 10 and stuff in the past, but now they're much easier. But I still could not see, maybe it was like the darkness on my TV or something. I did not see the ledge that you're supposed to climb up out of that room where you shoot the boulders. Like I could not find it. I had to finally look online. I'm like, I've circled this giant room multiple times. I know I'm supposed to go up there because it made that obvious. By the way that Barret climbs.
Oh, yeah. That spire thing?
Well, like the one arm. Like he jumps with one arm. I want that skill.
Yeah, because he's only got one arm that like works.
I know, but I think it's awesome and hilarious. But yeah, so I had to look it up online how to get out of there. Apparently a lot of people online are having the same issue as what I was reading, but
it probably is literally just the fact that
you found it.
Well, yeah, found is probably the incorrect word here. I think it's literally just that because I was on a mission to get every piece of mithril I could.
Yeah, but I do that too because I'm a completionist. I have to shoot every crystal.
I somehow
You just saw it.
It wasn't like a plan or anything. I just naturally found it and went because
You're just better than me at this. Thanks.
I don't remember getting lost, but I also don't remember like explicitly looking for like ways out. I was just wandering around looking for things to shoot.
You found it then. I didn't see it.
Does that make me a dumbass?
I did finally get out of that cavern. Yay for me.
Then you got to the fun part.
Yeah, the fun part that you're going to love, right? So Barret and Red come to another large cavern where they see Cloud, Aerith, and Tifa up there on like some ledge.
Hey guys, over here!
And then Barret has to solve a few, I would say easy minecart switch puzzles to be able to provide a way for...
No, they're super easy. They're just annoying. Yeah.
Right. To them to cross the ledge, right? So these puzzles to me are fine. I don't think they're hard enough to be annoying. And to me, they added some diverse play, which I like. But I also had the thought that Ernest is not going to like these.
No,
So-
because it's literally stolen from Tomb Raider. And mind you, I love Tomb Raider. I love that series, but it's like, this is exactly what happens in
But
Tomb
does
Raider.
Tomb Raider have to have sole ownership over game mechanics?
No,
Can't games borrow from each other just like movies do?
Well, I mean, it's the same studio now, right? So, or the same
Right.
parent
Same-
organization or whatever.
Right.
So clearly somebody who worked on Tomb Raider came over here. It's obvious, right? But it's still like, even to the point of the paint, whether it's white or yellow on the places where
Right.
you should climb or jump, that is exactly Tomb Raider. So it's,
Well, it's not just like Horizon Zero Dawn is that way. Like there's a
yeah,
ton
but
of,
think about who came first.
I don't actually know. I'm curious.
Everyone's borrowing from obviously Horizon borrowed from Tomb Raider. Like this is probably the same people that did it, right? Because you're within Square Enix now. But yeah, that was the same thing. I was like, man, I'm tired of pushing these stupid minecarts around. And what was even, I say annoying, but if you objectively look at it, it probably wasn't, was that you had the action buttons on both sides of the minecart. So you could have chosen
Oh,
to,
yes. You didn't know if you were supposed to pull or push.
you could have either pushed or pulled.
Yeah.
Right. And I didn't realize that until later because obviously
Oh.
I was doing like mostly pushing. And then I realized you could also pull it from the other side.
That opened up options you didn't see before, and you're probably irritated that you didn't see them. And
Well, yeah, because the vacuum cleaners, I feel like they were only push. You could pull if you
could pull them, but it was one side.
if you went backwards. But yeah, it was on one side.
Yeah.
And these ones had them on both sides.
Yeah. So, so you weren't a fan of that section.
No, never. Anything that slows me down, I'm not a fan.
But what about like, okay, so the reason it doesn't bother me is because when I go into these games, like I'm a completionist, but I love to explore just for the sake of exploring and enjoying like the game. So when I do those, as long as it's not super frustrating and there's not a ton of those kinds of puzzles, I don't mind the diverse play and the slowing down a little bit because my goal isn't to complete the chapter as fast as possible.
Oh, I don't mind the puzzles. Like I said, Breath of the Wild,
But you hated Breath of the Wild.
I never got past it because of the stupid like armor degrading and stuff. But like the puzzles were fine. I like the puzzles. But again, this is like, so like Tomb Raider's, one of the like cliches in Tomb Raider is where there's like something that's like hanging on either a rope or a chain and it's kind of stuck. And it's almost always like either a shipping container or just a big box. And then there's almost always a minecart.
Those minecarts. Perhaps they could block the water.
And what you have to do is you have to like get the minecart to roll freely to hit that thing to let it come off of whatever it's stuck. And then it
Right.
does one of two things. It either turns into like an elevator counterbalance type of thing,
Yeah.
or it flies off and like hits something else that then progresses the puzzle. Right? This is like, it's textbook Tomb Raider.
It's common, but it's been happening for decades in video games. Like I think Mario even has like mine carts, right?
It probably does, but I'm just saying like it was like cliche, right? But like you said, puzzles I have no problem with. Like if it's like Breath of the Wild type puzzles, not the stupid armor degrading and you having to eat jalapenos because you're going to go into a cold place and somehow the jalapenos keep you warm in the cold. Like, come on, that's ridiculous, right?
That's science, Ernest.
Yeah, exactly. It's
Science.
embarrassing science. But like the like exploring and figuring out like, oh, if I pull this lever over here and I pull this lever over here, it opens this door. You remember that in Remake where like depending on how you do things, the water in the sewers like comes up in certain areas and then goes down?
Yes.
And then you got to figure out like how to traverse that like muck and whatever.
Yes.
That's fine. I wasn't pushing around a vacuum cleaner or a minecart in there.
But like what's the part, what did you hate about it?
Actually, you know what? You talked about like walking around and kicking these boulders, right?
Yeah.
And they just like fly around like they're made of, I don't know, foam.
Yeah.
But the minecart actually acts like it weighs a ton.
Yeah.
And you're pushing it. So like, what's the discrepancy here with like, Barret should be able to just kick that minecart and it goes flying.
Like the physics doesn't match.
It doesn't match at all because this was part of the puzzle and the boulders weren't.
But I think that's part of being in on the joke, right? Like I think
mean,
that's part of like the developers, they're okay with that because it's funny.
The joke would be funnier if I kicked the minecart and it went flying. Like for
That
real.
would be
for
hilarious.
me. And I realize some people
Got
like,
it.
but like the one where you had to push the minecart underneath that thing so you could jump on top.
Yeah.
It's obvious what you need to do. It just takes you a while to get the thing lined up so you can do it.
True.
I think that's the crux of it.
Okay, and so to you, it feels like pointless, wasted time because you know what needs to be done. And now you just have to do it and it's annoying.
Right. And they're just slowing you down. Right.
Got it.
Again, I'm only on chapter 5, but like you're telling me you're 100 and something hours in.
Yeah.
There's clearly no need to slow us down. Right. If you got 100+ hours in a game, what's the point of slowing us down with a vacuum cleaner in the minecart? Like it just doesn't.
I think the diverse play and like the puzzles, I don't know. I think there's an argument to be made that sticking out in there isn't terrible.
But you already knew when you had to push those stupid things, you're like, oh, he's going to hate this.
Yeah.
And that is true because it was like, you are slowing me down for no reason.
Right. Well, I think like also there are going to be some 13-year-olds who play this game who it might be more challenging for them, right? So it might be simple for us and just feel like a little bit of a chore. But for them, it's like solving a puzzle maybe.
Yeah, I was going to say anyone who's played as many RPGs as we have,
you know exactly what to do.
We just look and we know what needs to be done.
Right, exactly. Like it's second nature.
But yeah, you're right. If you're new to the genre or
you're younger,
even younger, like maybe an 8 or a 10-year-old who's playing, they would struggle because they don't understand like what the puzzle is supposed to do. But but I feel like that's one of the, I will give Zelda's developers a little bit of credit in saying that like they do come up with some novel and interesting puzzles. So like I do like that part. But then they ruin the whole game with their like nonsense with armor and eating.
What I actually liked most about this whole sequence was the way that Barret and the others like kind of start teasing Cloud again about the 2,000 gil to do things.
Do you think you can give us a hand?
For $2,000.
Hilarious.
And then later, Aerith says the same thing to Barret.
Thanks, we owe you.
Yep, $2,000.
That's fair.
And it's just kind of this little stupid dialogue that I think is great because that's what would happen.
It's an inside joke,
in a party of people who appreciate each other are these like stupid little banters,
The reason the joke is so funny is because it started out as Cloud. He just seemed so unaffected, didn't care.
Yeah.
Right? He was a merc. I'm just here for money.
This is a one-time gig. When it's done, we're done.
Yes, it's funny to us, but I think what it's also doing is it's really painting that picture of Cloud is now bought in.
He's emotionally invested, whether
his soul is bought into it now.
100%.
To the point where the Gil joke is actually like...
is a joke.
It's a joke.
Right, where it was a reality before.
That's how I like it. No contract, no obligation.
He is sold on it, and now he's going to go all the way to the death.
100% agree with that. Yes. And I think that's actually the main purpose of this dialogue. It's not just this sake of banter for the sake of banter, right? We're showing a juxtaposition as to when they first met up and they first got to know each other.
Nobody do something this crazy just for money. They may not think you're a true believer, but you know what I think?
Not interested.
And their relationships then compared to now, and how invested Cloud is from like a personal standpoint instead of just a business relationship.
You better be worth the money, Merc. Every last gil.
That's why I like it so much.
Oh yeah. I think once they wove Sephiroth into the story, like that was the replacement for the 2,000 gil, right? Like he hates him and it's like, okay, I'm in on this now. Like,
like that was the moment where he personally became invested.
Yeah, regardless of your eco-terrorism or whatever else you're angry about, like Sephiroth is a hated individual for Cloud. And so like, I don't know if you want to call it a revenge motive, but maybe that's what it is. He's bought in now. The money doesn't matter anymore.
Okay, so you go back to like mission orientation, whereas I kind of go back to like personal affect for somebody.
I think for a certain kind of person, especially a soldier, the two are very interwoven.
Okay.
They're inseparable.
That's fair.
Because in order for you to risk your life for something, it has to be more than a dollar amount. Like your morality and your soul are interwoven in the mission.
That makes sense.
So it makes sense for a Cloud who was a soldier that his mentality is this.
Yeah, I could see that.
You guys need to focus.
Okay, so after your favorite minecar pushing around, basically you just go through a few more caverns, and then the Mythril Mines finish up with Barret and Red fighting the Mythril Golem boss. Do you remember the Mythril Golem boss?
Who couldn't remember?
That cool rock formation monster thing, right?
Well, so this is what I was telling you in the beginning of the episode of one of the reasons I loved this chapter and how they closed it in the end is because in The Lord of the Rings, when Gandalf's telling the party about the story about the dwarves' greed and they dug too deep and they basically unearthed the Balrog of Morgoth, right?
Yeah.
Which is what was their ultimate undoing. In that same vein, he ends up having this epic battle with the Balrog of Morgoth that results in them falling all the way down into the abyss. And then that's when Gandalf changes from Gandalf the Grey to Gandalf the White. The theory is that he is cleansed and purged of all imperfections in the flame of the Balrog, and that's how he becomes Gandalf the White.
Yes, I remember that.
It reminded me of like, this was Final Fantasy's version of the epic fight with the Balrog of Morgoth at the bottom of the mine where the mithril was being mined out of.
Interesting.
Except we got a mithril golem. Not the same, but like on parallel tracks. And
Interesting.
So, of course, I loved it. I was all about it. And I was like, I'm going to kill this thing. I couldn't wait. Because to me, I was fighting the Balrog of Morgoth.
Yeah, see, I didn't even think about that, but I could see how there's some parallels there. That's cool.
Unfortunately, because I was reading more into it than is actually there.
Unfortunately.
I was expecting some kind of like cleansing and purging event where I'd walk out some miraculous being out of this thing. That's not what happened.
Right. It was kind of a side boss fight. Like, I didn't feel like it was terribly, and maybe that's why I missed the parallel that you kind of saw, because it felt very much like, oh, we got to fight this thing and move on. Like, there wasn't a lot of acknowledgement beyond that. Like, it didn't change anybody.
No, but I will say there's one thing that did annoy me about this fight, and it has annoyed me about a lot of the fights. And granted, I know this is like textbook Final Fantasy, so I'm not arguing that I didn't expect this. So for example, in 16, when you have the fight with Ultima and you have the multiple stages, you're actually changing forms, right? As you're fighting this thing. And in this one, it's like you go from fighting the thing, and then when you're doing like a stage flip, instead of it like changing form, it ends up like, okay, well now you're fighting its arm. Or now it has two arms.
Right.
And it's like, that's so annoying to me. I'd rather you just like let me fight the character head on and just make it to where every hit I'm doing is like a plink knocking like 1 HP off of it.
I see.
But it's one giant phase. Or you do what 16 did, which is like you fight the first form and then it completely changes form to a new one, and you're not like trying to hit its arm instead of hitting it in the face. That's annoying to me too, but
got it.
Having played Final Fantasy for so many decades at this point, like,
you know,
I know that's, yeah, it's the game and I can't do
it. It happens a lot.
But at least in 16 they learned. Now I realize they're completely different stories.
Yeah, it's different stories, but also that's the Ultima boss, right? That's the final boss.
Right.
Like, it makes sense to put tons of money and production value and thought into like what phases and like how people are going to change. This is just some rock monster in a cave that wasn't even in the original game. So I feel like I forgive it for that.
He's made of mithril though, so like it should be a very difficult, arduous fight.
Was it hard for you?
No,
did you think it wasn't hard for me either?
Not at all.
Pretty easy.
I mean, this thing was made, the whole thing was mithril. It wasn't like I have mithril armor, I have a mithril weapon. Like, it is mithril that you're fighting.
Right.
So it should have been very difficult.
But they kind of downplayed mithril as not being that intense at the very beginning of the cave. So
because they have better stuff now that's infused with
it's like they're setting up this boss as a threat, but it's not an ultimate threat.
And that's another thing I appreciate about this is like in 7, like, yes, you know, you obviously heard about Hojo and you knew what he was doing and all that kind of stuff. But I think in this series of games, they've put more effort into showing like what Hojo did.
Yes.
Like all of the different things that he was doing in his lab and like the results of those, right? Like these magic infused things and all that. Like,
and that's a theme. Right?
Hojo, you are really something.
And it actually is super interesting because I dislike Hojo significantly more than I dislike Sephiroth.
Yes.
Even though I watch Sephiroth murder people. But like, Hojo, he's just gross. And there's other things in future chapters that we'll talk about with Hojo that I'm just like,
oh yeah.
Ugh.
I agree with you 100% on that. And I realize that every person is going to have their own perspective of why they hate Hojo. But for me personally, as a man of science and an engineer, it really makes me mad that this guy was like
totally unethical in every way.
Completely unethical in every way and just like using this stuff for the worst purpose. And what was even more slimy about it wasn't just that like he was experimenting on people and innocent creatures to gain knowledge. It was that he was then selling the results of that crap to Shinra to get more money into his lab so he could continue his crap.
Yeah, he's a bad dude.
That's what disgusted me so much about him.
And to go beyond that, so for anybody who's played, I mean, Crisis Core, but not just Crisis Core, Dirge of Cerberus, which is a crappy game.
I didn't play that one either, so.
So that one's all about Vincent's story. I don't like first-person shooters, and so.
I love those. Maybe I should play it.
Maybe you should play it.
Like you said, it's crappy.
But there's a lot of story there that comes into play in this game. So if you've played that, or in my case, I just watched somebody play it because I, like I said, not first-person shooter fan. But there's so much that Hojo can be hated for in that game and that story. And I think we're actually going to learn a lot about what that is. I think they're going to bring it into this game. So I'm not going to give it away here, but Yeah, Hojo's. Ugh,
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, he's filthy.
He's just gross. He's nasty.
He's just filthy.
He's a good voice actor, though.
Oh, yeah.
But he's gross.
I can only hope you will continue not to disappoint.
This is the problem you have with the guy who plays Negan in the Walking Dead series.
You always talk about The Walking Dead as though I've seen it. I can't handle The Walking Dead. Zombies and I do not get along.
The actor who plays Negan, and I can't remember his name off the top of my head.
Who I don't know, but okay.
Really great actor, super nice guy, biggest heart you'll ever see in an individual. But the character is evil. Well, he's misunderstood. But like up until this point in the series, basically when they jumped the shark in the television series,
okay,
people hated this guy so much that when he was out in public, people were just like, they hated him. They hated his face.
Oh no.
Because he was such a good actor.
Because he was so effective in his role.
He was so good. And like he actually ended up doing a series of interviews where he was like, I'm not that guy. Like, I'm just a regular person, because that's the amount of hate that came towards him because of that character. That's how good he was, right?
People are stupid.
Yeah, and so like, I hope that doesn't happen. Well, I mean, granted, this is a voice actor. It's different, right? Like, it's not their face on Hojo.
People don't recognize voice actors typically on like the subway or something. Yeah, unless they're really, really well known.
For the most part, right? But Hojo is just so slimy. I can't stand him. So yes, not only am I hoping they like tell the whole story,
yes,
I'm hoping he meets a brutal
end
and punishing end.
Oh, yeah.
And I hope it's at my hand.
I'm not one for revenge and death, but I think I agree with you there.
Someone like that deserves it.
Totally.
Right? Like a Hojo deserves it.
Yeah, that rock monster, that was fun. Nothing major to talk about there.
Again, because of the parallels, I enjoyed it, but ultimately, it wasn't the best fight.
Yeah, it was just kind of like, oh, but it was fine.
It was okay.
I didn't have a problem with it.
It was okay.
Yeah.
And granted, it's a minor boss.
But I thought the pacing in the mines was good and how it
Yeah.
kind of accentuated the ending. Like it was a little bit of a punctuation on the chapter.
I don't expect them to put like $10 million into the ending sequence like they did with Ultimate. Right. Like this was maybe a couple of tens of thousands and then it was over.
Yeah, probably more than that, but yeah. Finally, Barret and Red meet up with Cloud and Aerith and Tifa, and then the party's whole again.
What took you?
Stumbled on the killer rock formation and couldn't tear ourselves away.
And that's just basically where we walk through the ending of the Mythril Mine cave. So it's cool because going back to what I was talking about in the progression of man-made stuff that you see as you move more shallow, then here you start to really see a lot of fencing. You even see like glimpses of sunlight coming in through little windows or like cracks in the cave. And it's clear, like it would be if you were in an actual cave probably, that you're about to burst out the exit of this cave. And that's exactly what happens. You burst out into the sunlight. And at that point, before we switch to the next chapter, you find 7 of those robed guys just like groaning and standing there outside of the exit, like they're about to head for Junon, right? But before they start walking, there's another kind of interesting scene that doesn't have to be there, but it's obviously there for a reason. And that's where this like giant predatory kind of bird sweeps down from the sky and scoops up one of the robed guys and carries him away, likely for dinner, right? Like that's the end of that guy. And I thought that was a really interesting moment because, again, there's obviously a purpose for it here. And my thoughts on why that's in this game is a couple different reasons, right? So first, it continues to emphasize the struggle that these robed guys are constantly having, right? Not being able to defend themselves in moments of life and death, most likely at no fault of their own, right? They're these like perpetual victims, right? And more so, like you were talking about with Barret, it's at the fault of Shinra. It's Hojo and Shinra that are causing this like helplessness in these innocent victims, or probably mostly innocent at least.
Poor bastards.
So it builds sympathy in us for these robed guys while also building more dislike for Shinra. So that's one purpose, I think, for this like just bird swooping out and taking somebody away. The other reason I think this scene exists that jumps out at me is in storytelling and like filmmaking, which is my world, and gaming included, it's interesting as an audience to witness something unfold on screen, but it's even more impactful and more interesting to watch someone else witness something that unfolds on screen, right? So like seeing character reactions to something that we're also witnessing, that builds empathy and emotion between us and connects us more to characters, which is exactly what happens here, right? Because we could have just seen the robe guy be whisked away by the bird on our own without the party being there, outside the cave, maybe even before the party showed up or something. But it's so much more impactful to be there to see the characters we love and are connected to, witness that moment because we have this instant connection with them because we're both reacting very similarly as like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, I mean, they're setting us up for the gaslight, right? That's all this is.
It's all for the gaslighting. Yeah, I just thought that was a really good storytelling tactic. And small moment doesn't drive the plot, but it does drive the story, if that makes sense.
No, it does. It does. It's kind of like we were talking about earlier where that 2000 gil inside joke thing in the mines is obviously showing how Cloud is bought in at this point.
Right.
And then there's a scene that happens right before we walk outside where they're standing there and they're talking to each other, right? And they're about to walk outside and Cloud says, But don't forget,
Shinra knows we're here now.
And this is where Barret comes forward and says,
right,
I don't care if they're out there, Shinra or anybody else.
I'm going to mow them down.
That doesn't make any difference to me. I ain't stopping. Not for them or anyone.
That thing right there is like the equivalent of what they did with Cloud with the 2000 gil, they're now doing for Barret. Like Barret is...
That's a good point.
He's sold, but it's also bringing us back on mission. Like,
right. It's the motivation, right?
We saw all this other stuff that happened and we were like on a side mission. We're in a dungeon and now we're about to go back out in the light. And he's like reminding the party, hey, remember the mission.
Yes.
This is what we're doing.
When you're in the Mythril Mines, right, it starts out like your motivation is following the robe guys, but then your mission has to kind of, like your overall mission has to kind of be set aside because the objective right then is to just get out of the cave.
Because you run into the Turks.
Well, it's to get out of the cave.
Right.
They're in the cave. They need to get out of it, right? And they keep falling deeper into it. So it makes sense that they would put that in as they're exiting the cave to be like, okay, we're out of the cave. Let's remember why we're really doing this.
100%.
Let's get back to tailing the guys in robes. They're our best chance of finding Sephiroth.
So that's even funnier, right? They walk out, Shinra's nowhere to be seen.
The bird wasn't sent by Shinra.
And Shinra was not there.
But it does build that sympathy for those robe guys.
It builds a sympathy for the robe guys, but at the same time, I think they're painting the picture of like, Shinra doesn't even care about you. Shinra thinks you're so insignificant. They know you're in that cave and they're like, leave them alone.
Well, the Turks were there. They're from Shinra, and they just left them alone.
Yeah, they just left them because they have...
I mean, they fought them, but...
It's almost like they're looking at our party as more of an annoyance, right? Than an actual threat. And so Shinra has other much bigger machinations going on, as we'll get into. And like, granted, I'm only in Chapter 5, but when I saw what happened in Chapter 4, I was like, this guy's crazy. Rufus Shinra is nuts.
Yeah.
Like Vladimir Putin nuts, right?
Oh, man.
Shinra territory. Come on.
So part of you is like, oh, we're screwed. But the other part of you is like, well, we're on a mission, right? And so this is another thing that ties me back to Lord of the Rings, which is like that party, the Fellowship of the Ring, they knew from day one when they met with Elrond that they were screwed.
Okay.
They knew that they were screwed before they left that elven stronghold. And yet they
persevered.
I mean, some of them died along the way, right?
Yeah.
But like the point is like they knew what they were in for and they were sold and they were going to see it to the conclusion.
There is a parallel there.
And that's why like I feel like this chapter was just so good because of that. Like there was so much in there. And of course I could be reading all of it into it and it had nothing to do with it. But
I think you're right. I think that is intentional. I think that those motivations and that perseverance and that we're stopping at nothing and we're together as a party. There's a lot of that in Lord of the Rings. Like the party pressing forward through the difficulties as being this. That's very similar. And I think it is written in there with a purpose.
And I will point out, you have to remember that when Lord of the Rings was originally written, right? It was written before World War II in the lead up to it.
Interesting.
And it is a social commentary on the greed of men, specifically powerful men, and the results of that and the death and depravity that happened on a global scale as a result of this complete
greed,
consummation by greed and evil.
Yep.
So of course, like a lot of people watch Lord of the Rings and they're like, oh yeah, it's great. I love it. But they don't realize that the author was alive during peak fascism.
It was a social commentary.
It's social commentary, right? So you're watching it happen again in Final Fantasy VII.
It's social commentary and warning.
Yes, it's supposed to be a warning.
Right? It's a lesson.
Absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Oh, yep. Yeah.
Now, granted, almost every Final Fantasy has some concept of maybe not a world war, but at least a continental war or something.
Right. Some kind of looming threat politically.
Right. Looming threat. End of the world scenario, basically, is what it's coming down to.
End of the world, very common.
It would make sense that you pulled a story in that was social commentary about the rise of fascism prior to World War II into this story.
I think that's really good writing. I think that they've been able to kind of pull that out.
So if they get in our way, that's on them.
And yeah, once the robed guys go from 7 to 6, because one gets pulled away from the bird, we basically just see the city of Junon in the distance ahead.
That city they're headed to, is that?
Junon.
And that concludes chapter 3, right? Because we're now in the Junon region, and that'll be chapter 4, which is a big chapter that we'll be discussing shortly here. So if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe, because you'll want to be a part of that conversation.
And I did not like chapter 4.
You did not like chapter? Really? I love chapter 4, except for I definitely have some strong opinions on a few things in chapter 4. But
I mean, when it turned into Dance Dance Revolution, right? I was done. I was like, no. And granted, I know we did it back in the wall market thing.
It was so good, though.
Man, I was like, not again.
No, Honeybee Inn is like, that is one of the best moments in that game. Top and Japanese and amazing.
The part that kills it for me, and I'll repeat this when we cover chapter 4, is that I am not a native PlayStation player.
Me neither, so I don't remember where the buttons are.
I don't remember where the triangle, the square, and the circle, and so I screw it up every time.
That is so true. I have the exact same
thought. And I can't,
thought.
like, I just, for some reason, I cannot mentally,
like, where is the triangle versus the square?
Grasp
like,
it.
I'm the same exact way. Yeah. I have the same problem.
And it drives me crazy, and it's like, God,
that was, it made it way challenging.
And even between, like, messing it up, I'll look at my controller.
Me too. But
and
then
I'll be like, okay, I got it. And then I screw it up again. And I'm like, God, I hate this. So like, this is why I hate chapter 4.
We'll get into that more, but we definitely had a similar experience.
Whereas I love 3 and it was all for me. 4 was for somebody else.
Now, I would say I'm excited to talk about chapter 4 with you. As far as chapter 3 goes, it doesn't win the award for me for my favorite chapter, but I enjoyed it. I thought it was great nonetheless, and it was a beyond worthy tribute to that brief moment in the original game where you go into the Mythril Mine. I had a lot of fun at the combat. I had fun playing with the different characters. I still gravitate more towards some rather than others, but it was just cool being immersed in like this really incredible visual environment. Not a huge story driving scene, but it gets the job done for what it needs to do story-wise.
Oh, absolutely. And even for someone like me who's just like a massive fan of historical fiction and nonfiction, it just all like came together. I loved it.
It hit the mark.
You know what really annoys me though is like sometimes we'll be shooting these episodes and like I give all this commentary and then later on something dawns on me, like the whole Spear of Destiny thing with Dion.
Oh, yeah.
And then the other day when I thought about it, when we were talking about like Kihel and the light, and I was like, you know, ironically, when light goes through water, that's when you get the rainbow. And Dion's character was clearly...
He was gay.
Yeah, and I was like, man, like it's all written in there.
I didn't think about that. Did you come up with that yourself?
Yes, but it wasn't until later. It wasn't until much later when I thought about it and I was like, yes.
And you're like, why didn't I say that?
They wrote it right into the damn story and I missed it. Like,
I don't know. If they wrote that in there deliberately, that's pretty impressive. I think that might not be deliberate.
There's more than one person on that team who's gay and put it in there. I can promise you that. And they left it there for us to find it. And of course, because I'm not, I just didn't notice it. But then like after thinking about it, I'm like, yeah, it makes perfect sense.
That's pretty cool. I don't know that I'm going to say they did it deliberately, but I think that's really cool.
We'll find out with the Rising Tide, right?
I know. We need to play the Rising Tide.
I downloaded it already. I
have it downloaded too, but I'm 115 hours into Rebirth.
And now, granted, the DLC I bought digitally, right? But I always buy the Steelbook editions of physical.
Yeah.
So if I want to switch games, I actually have to come and switch the discs.
Oh.
Like you just go pick a different.
I didn't even think my PS5 has a disc player.
Yeah, I collect media, right?
I know. No, it makes sense for a collector. I don't.
As a matter of fact, my Nintendo Switch collection today just passed 1,000 physical Switch games.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Are you serious?
Mm-hmm.
Wait, that you own?
Yeah.
You own 1,000 physical Switch games.
1,000, yeah.
What percentage have you played? Like even a tiny bit?
Less than 1%.
It's just collection.
There's just as a
I
matter of
didn't
fact,
even know that they had 1,000 games made.
As a matter of fact, just about all of them, like maybe 990 of them, are still sealed in their original plastic. They've never been opened.
So is that just for the sake of collection, or is there like a resale value after a certain amount of time?
There's obviously resale value. Like this collection at this point is probably worth north of $75,000.
Oh, for sure.
But it's not that. The reason I'm saving is because I'm thinking, I could be wrong here, but this is one of the last of the physical media that we're going to have.
True.
At some point, we're pivoting to all digital.
Oh, yeah. It's coming quick.
And the thing is, like, there are so many good games that are on Switch. And I can still put my original NES games into an NES and play them 35 plus years later.
Whereas when we go full digital, you're at the mercy of the people who decide what should be in the libraries. And you have to rebuy everything.
My kids, my grandkids will be able to take these games, put them into a physical device and play them long after.
But what if they do it and they're like, this game is lame? Like nowadays.
They might. And actually, as you know, I'm part of like this larger collectors group, right?
Yeah.
Like, so one of my other friends has far more games than I do, and he goes all the way back to original Atari.
Wow.
He's actually in the process of trying to open a museum in Washington State.
Does he have Joust?
He has everything.
Because Joust was my favorite when I was 5 years old.
He has everything, but ironically, he does not have a Switch collection.
Oh.
Because he mainly collects old stuff.
Okay.
And I told him, I said, once you get it open and it's successful, I may just donate this entire collection to the museum.
Whoa, that's awesome.
He was like, I'll take you up on that.
That's crazy. So I'm a collector as well, as you can see by my shelves. Like I have a ton of different Final Fantasy figures, but I am not a collector in like keeping them sealed in the box. I take them out of the box so that I can like enjoy the way they look, and like I'll let my kid play with the less fragile ones sometimes, you know.
So the 10 or 20 of them that I have opened are Final Fantasy games.
Got it.
Because I play those.
Because we gotta play those.
Right?
Yeah,
and
for sure.
Every game I own for PlayStation or Xbox, all of those are opened.
Yeah.
Because I played them.
Okay.
But the Switch is an actual just collection. Like they're all sealed in pristine condition.
That's a massive collection. Good on you.
It's basically a museum piece.
That's so cool.
If I die and someone opens them all to play them.
Do you live in an apartment?
Yeah.
How in the world do you have room for that?
So I have a bookshelf that is literally full, like it's like 3 layers deep full. And then
you know what? You sent me a picture. I'm looking at it.
And then a closet behind me that has bins full, so that it's stacked to the top full of these things.
Wow.
You guys need to focus.
Well, that's going to do it for this episode of the Final Fantasy Files. We can be found anywhere you get your podcasts, and you can see the video version on either Spotify or YouTube. And you can follow us on our new dedicated YouTube channel, Final Fantasy Files, aptly named, right? Which is starting to gather a pretty cool community. So special thanks to everyone who's already been leaving comments and joining in the discussion. It's been pretty cool to see.
Absolutely. And don't forget, share our podcast with anyone you know who might be interested in Final Fantasy or just JRPGs in general, or just the nonsense that we come up with on these podcasts too. Like, you know, I'm sure there's a lot of people who are like, you know what, we're tired of hearing about world events. We want to hear about
something different.
About the ultimate gaslighting of Square Enix of all of its player base in these video games. So just share it with all your friends. I'm sure they'll love it.
And with that, walk tall, my friends.
And may the flames of the Phoenix forge the mithril in your hearts.
I'm like really proud of you for like matching up the episode with like your sign off. I think that's like, you've got a skill set there.
It's signature
Ernest.
now. Like I can't abandon it.
You can't change
at
it
this
now.
point,
And like
right?
mine sounds so lame now compared to yours, because like walk to all my friends and people who played 15 are like, yeah, and everybody else is like, what are you talking about?